hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You're with GB News, and the breaking news this hour is that King Abdullah of Jordan has been in London. He's travelled from the Middle East to London to meet the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, in the last half an hour. This comes after a fervid round of crisis talks by world leaders with others to try to inject diplomacy into the conflict between Israel and Hamas. This was a short time ago. The visit was short and sweet. We saw about 5 minutes ago King Abdullah leave Number 10 after short talks with the Prime Minister. And the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has been visiting Riyadh, where he spoke to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. And as he left Egypt today, he outlined the US's key 4 objectives. First of all, the US sticking to talks with leaders of the region. He repeated the US's position that it stands by Israel as expressing the hope, that the conflict wouldn't spill into any other parts of the region. He also said the US is working to effect the release of Israeli hostages taken by Hamas, as well as ensuring the humanitarian crisis in Gaza didn't worsen. It's after the European Union's national leaders backed Israel's right to defend itself in line with humanitarian and international law. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the US President Joe Biden have agreed to renew water supplies to parts of southern Gaza. Separately, the United Nations has warned that hospitals filled with wounded victims will run out of fuel and supplies in the next 2 days, and all this as Mr Netanyahu convened his emergency council to prepare for what he described as demolishing Hamas, as Israel prepared for a ground offensive into Gaza. A spokesperson for the IDF telling GB News it is, though, continuing to let people in northern Gaza move from their homes to safety as they prepare for that ground assault. Now, here at home, 4 government flights carrying Britons have left Israel today. 2 more are expected later. The Foreign Office is telling British people in Gaza to be ready in case the Rafah border crossing with Egypt is open. We have had some indications that that might happen after talks with the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, but we haven't quite got that confirmed just yet. The UK Foreign Office on standby for that confirmation as well. It is currently the only route out of the territory. Well, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, told GB News the UK government is doing everything it can to get British people trapped in Gaza. Safe passage out. Meanwhile, here at home, hundreds of people have gathered at a vigil in central London to commemorate Israeli victims of the Hamas terror attack. Many were draped in Israeli flags and held posters saying, "Bring them home," with flyers handed out featuring the names and faces of those taken hostage by Hamas. A strong police presence patrolled the event that took place in central London, in Westminster, in fact. And regarding events yesterday, the Metropolitan Police said it is urgently reviewing content posted online following protests. Yesterday, the force releasing a picture of two women they're looking to identify who displayed contentious images of paragliders. Those images appearing to glorify Hamas paragliders who attacked Israel last weekend. The demonstration was mainly peaceful yesterday, went without issue. 15 people arrested as pockets of disorder broke out later on in the evening. Now, in news away from the Israel-Hamas conflict, London Luton Airport has said today it's unlikely that any vehicles will be salvageable following a car park fire which caused it to eventually collapse. Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Service responded to the blaze on level 3 of the airport's terminal car park on Tuesday. Andrew Hopkinson, Chief Fire Officer for Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue, said up to 1,500 vehicles were parked inside the car park at the time of the fire. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Good morning, I'm Christopher Hope and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show. I'm presenting while Camilla is away. It's been a huge and devastating week in the Middle East and we'll be reflecting that in the show today. I'll be joined by both the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, and the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Labour's David Lammy, to discuss what they think the UK's response should be to the war. Now, as Israel's army prepares for a ground invasion of Gaza, I'll be speaking to a representative of the Israeli Defence Force, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner. Israel's ambassador to the UK, Tzipi Hotovely, will also be here, joining me in the GB News studio. What do you do, James Cleverly, when it gets very difficult out there in Israel? How will you cope with that?
Well, sadly, the situation is already very difficult. We have seen an unprecedented terrorist attack against Israel. We have seen Israel, I think, shaken to its core by a death of people unprecedented, even in the eras of conflict since the formation of the modern state of Israel. So, of course, we do support Israel's desire for self-defense. We do support their actions to re-establish peace in southern Israel and to remove the threat from Hamas terrorists. In all the conversations that we have had with Israel, of course, we do raise our commitment to international law and our desire to minimize civilian casualties. They are very conscious of that, and they have given commitments that they will do whatever they can to minimize civilian casualties, although, of course, because of the geographical and political situation in Gaza, with Palestinians being put intentionally in harm's way by Hamas, that is incredibly difficult.
James Cleverly, do you agree with the former MI6 chief, Alex Younger, warning that an invasion will play into the hands of Hamas?
Well, there is, of course, a real risk that Hamas is successful in turning this into a wider regional kind of Arab-Israeli or Muslim versus the rest of the world conflict. Israel are very conscious of that and are listening very carefully when we discuss what we can do to minimise the risk of that happening. I've been speaking with the leadership of countries in the region, discussing how we can minimise the risk of that happening. But Israel are conscious of that, we are conscious of that, and the international community is working to minimise the risk of that happening.
Is your worry, though, James Cleverly, that this could be an open-ended conflict with no obvious exit? Because once Israel go in, it's very hard to see how the conflict will end.
Well, of course, this terrible situation has run on for many years already. Israel left Gaza in 2005. Gaza has been run by Hamas since 2006, and Israel have come under a consistent attack from Hamas emanating from Gaza since that time. So, of course, we are working to ensure that Israel have a plan, have an exit strategy, and we will, of course, continue to do whatever we can to minimise the risk that this becomes an enduring, extended, painful regional conflict.
Is there a risk, though, of war crimes by Israeli troops?
Sorry, I missed that question.
Sorry, James Cleverly. Is there a risk, though, of war crimes, that the humanitarian rights of those in Gaza could be violated by Israeli troops? And what would the UK say to that?
So I have raised the importance of international law and the minimisation of civilian casualties directly with the Israeli government. President Herzog, the president of Israel, has reaffirmed Israel's commitment to international law and their desire to minimise civilian casualties. As I said, one of the challenges is that Hamas habitually puts Palestinians in harm's way as part of their wider efforts. They are a terrorist organisation. They use terrorist tactics, and those tactics are not exclusively directed towards Israelis. They are also, there are millions of Palestinians living in Gaza under the yoke of a terrorist organisation, and Hamas's actions are putting those Palestinian lives at risk.
On that point, James Cleverly, your Tory colleague Crispin Blunt warned that the UK will be complicit in war crimes if we support Israel's attempt to defend itself. What would you say to Crispin Blunt and people on your own backbenches?
Well, I have spoken to Crispin about this issue. He is a long-standing opponent of Israel's actions. I fundamentally disagree. I fundamentally disagree with his assessment of this situation.
In terms of the UK and how many Britons might be out there in Israel and Gaza, do you know how many Brits are actually being held hostage by Hamas? Are there any at all?
So we don't know precise numbers. The nature of Israel as a state, particularly as a haven for Jewish communities around the world, means there are a very large number of dual nationals, of British dual nationals, but who regard themselves as Israeli, regard Israel as their permanent home, indeed may even be serving the Israeli Defence Forces. So the precise numbers, excuse me, so the precise numbers of British people, British nationals that we need to support is unclear. We know that in Gaza there are numbers in the low hundreds of people who have registered with the British government seeking our support, and we will of course support them in whatever way we can, and we will continue to support British nationals who are in Israel who are seeking to return back to the UK.
You've got flights laid on, haven't you, for those in Israel? How are you dealing with Brits in Gaza? Are you helping them to find a way out, maybe to the south?
So we have been liaising very, very closely with the Israeli government, with the Egyptian government, and we know that there have been talks to try and reopen the Rafah crossing. Now, that is the border crossing between southern Gaza and Egypt. At the moment, that is the only credible exit route from people from Gaza. We will continue to work to try and get that crossing reopened, although at the moment it is not open, and that is, of course, making humanitarian and consular support into Gaza incredibly difficult.
Yeah. The UK has deployed military assets to the Eastern Mediterranean, James Cleverly. Why is that? Will the RAF be doing any airlifts, for example, or why are we out there with our military hardware?
Well, we are keeping our options open with regard to how we support British nationals in the region. So this is to give us as many options in terms of consular support as possible. We're also trying to deter this becoming a wider regional conflict. So we are saying for any organisations, militia groups or others in the region that are seeking to turn this into a regional conflict, so we're going to do everything we can, both diplomatically, to prevent this spilling out into becoming a regional conflict.
So is there a possibility then that the British Army or the Navy may get involved in some kind of confrontation out there?
So So our posture there is predominantly to support British nationals and any work that we need to do for consular support. We are not envisaging engaging in military action.
And just to ask you about the marching in London yesterday, where you're standing, tens of thousands of demonstrators in London. Were you concerned by that? And of course, they're marching in support of the Palestinian people, but there were some other people there with badges, some pictures of paragliders on their backs, that kind of thing. That makes you worried? I mean, Hamas is a proscribed terrorist group in this country.
So one of the points that I would make is that we have a long-standing tradition of protest, and I completely respect people's right to protest. I would also, however, make the point that supporting the cause of the Palestinian people and supporting Hamas and their terrorist atrocities are not the same thing. And I think that some people have rather naively conflated the two. Hamas has been responsible for significant loss of Palestinian life as well as Israeli life. Hamas are no friend to the Palestinian people.
James Cleverly.
They have blocked the Oslo process. They have collapsed
James Cleverly, thank you.
Talk of two-state solution. They are no friend of the Palestinian.
James, there's lots more to come. In just a moment, you'll be here for my interview from early today with the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. We'll, of course, keep you updated on all the latest developments. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry, here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. If you enjoyed the fine conditions we've had around this weekend, we will be holding on to that into the start of the new week as well. A lot of nice conditions to end this evening with as well. A few scattered showers for some coastal districts in the north, but most of us will be staying dry. Some isolated mist and fog patches are possible overnight, and temperatures will be tumbling down a bit. Mid to low single figures in our towns and cities. Rural spots can expect a touch of frost, particularly for central southern Scotland down into northern England. So quite a chilly start to Monday morning. There will also be a touch more cloud around on Monday compared to the weekend, so I can't promise the wall-to-wall sunshine that some of us had throughout Saturday and Sunday. But some brightness still poking through, hazy sunshine in there. Showers feeding into the far southeast of England, a few dotted across northern Scotland as well. Temperatures perhaps up by a degree or so compared to Sunday, generally around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius. The winds, though, will be strengthening in the southwest, and that is due to this area of low pressure that is gradually going to push its way northwards as we head towards Tuesday. So increasingly starting to see gales develop for parts of Wales and southwest England as we head into Tuesday. Most of us should stay dry during daylight hours, though, just this shield of cloud gradually pushing its way northward. So again, sunshine turning hazier in places. This rain, though, will eventually move its way in as we head into the middle part of the week, potentially heavy at times, and some disruption is possible, so do keep up to date with the forecast.
On Mark Dolan tonight, thousands of woke lefties cheering on the murder and mutilation of Jewish people. So much for Be Kind. In my take at 10, with the Ukraine war and the Middle East conflict spiking oil and gas prices, net zero is now never zero. Also, has the BBC embarrassed Britain with its Israel stance? Plus the papers and my top pundits. We're live from 9.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, earlier, I spoke to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Labour MP David Lammy. I started by asking him whether Labour supports the invasion of Gaza.
Look, we said right from the beginning that we support Israel's right to defend itself. They have had the most awful, horrendous terrorist attack. There are still 130 hostages currently in Gaza. Rape, murder, children, women, they have a right to go into Gaza to get those hostages, to degrade the military rockets and equipment that's been used against them, and of course, to take out Hamas, a proscribed terrorist organization.
But do you worry, though, that Israel might risk breaking international law by doing this? Because if the civilian casualties pile up, then what?
Keir Starmer has said all along that any operation must be according to international law. And so it's hugely important that civilian casualties are minimized, that humanitarian aid and access is there, that people have access to food, to water, to medicine, and that there are corridors, safe corridors, so that people can pass safely through the country without being bombed. We cannot, as democracies, and Israel is a democracy, step back from the importance of international law at this moment, as hard as it is.
How long do you think any war in Gaza might last for, David Lammy?
Well, look, I'm not an army general. I haven't got the intelligence available to me. But all of us, of course, are worried particularly about the children, the women, the civilians who could be caught up in conflict, and about the urban warfare that we might be about to witness. So I pray and hope that it doesn't go on for longer than is necessary.
Should the UK government be doing more to get British citizens out of Gaza?
Well, look, I called earlier in the week to ensure that British citizens were able to get out of both Israel and Gaza. I spoke to the Egyptians yesterday, and I know that they are in discussions about the Rafah crossing, and many Brits are making their way to that crossing so they can exit the country. And I'm pleased, of course, that there are planes now leaving Israel with UK citizens.
Do you want to see more UK humanitarian aid going to Gaza?
Well, look, the situation in Gaza was already amongst the very worst in the country. This is the third most populated area, densely populated area on the planet. Half of the population are under the age of 14. I have noted that the European Union has tripled its aid to Gaza overnight, and we have called on the government to look again at the support we give to the citizens of Gaza at this time.
Is there a number on that, David Lammy, that you want to see it go up to in terms of aid?
Well, look, you will recall that this government cut aid substantially, not just to Gaza, but to places like Afghanistan, Sudan. It will be for the government to set that figure within its means, of course. But I think along with the international community, this is a time to be in support of civilians, citizens, and of course humanitarian workers, many of whom are British, going about their work at this time.
What do you think James Cleverly, your counterpart, should be doing at the moment? Should he be urging restraint from Israel?
Well, look, I do think that over the last 24 hours, we've seen the European Union, we've seen Antony Blinken, we've seen Lloyd Austin, the Defense Secretary in the US, Emmanuel Macron, all understanding and being absolutely clear that we support Israel's rights to defend itself, and we recognize the hard choices that are in front of the Israeli unity government, national government at this moment. Notwithstanding that, the international community is saying that this has got to be within international law, and of course, we have to follow the rules of war. Even in war, there are rules, and they are important rules that came out of the horrors of the Second World War.
Do you worry that the violence in Israel and Gaza will take away the focus from the war in Ukraine, David Lammy?
Well, look, we have a war in Europe that is ongoing, that is a result of the imperial ambitions of Putin. And now we have war in the Middle East. The bandwidth of the international community is strained at this point in time. War always takes place where diplomacy has failed. But we must support Israel in its attempt to deal with the proscribed terrorist organization Hamas.
Yeah. David Lammy, you'll have seen the pictures of the march in London yesterday, tens of thousands of people marching down Whitehall past the BBC. What did you make of that? There were very few arrests, weren't there? Even though Hamas is a proscribed terrorist group in the UK and they were supporting the Palestinians yesterday. What do you take on that march?
Look, we live in a free society where a democracy, where people are able to protest and to make their voices heard. And I recognize the huge concerns that the Palestinian people have, their dignity, their human rights, and that we get to that two-state solution so that Israel can be a secure and safe place, and the Palestinians have their own sovereign state where they can live in dignity as well. The police must make these very difficult calls, though, where people contravene the law and stray into glorifying hate. And I suspect that they got that balance right, just about right yesterday.
Yeah. And just finally, David Lammy, what's your position on the rise in anti-Semitic attacks in the UK? We've got reports in the weekend papers about some Jewish people hiding the Star of David.
Look, I think it's horrendous, and I represent the Stamford Hill area of London, which is one of the historic homes of our Jewish communities over more than a century. The rise in anti-Semitism is abysmal. We must stand up to this hate. The idea that there are school children not attending school through fear, not wearing uniform through fear, people taking off the Star of David, hiding, pretending that they are not of Jewish faith is entirely unacceptable. And I stand in solidarity with Jewish communities at this time, who must have the full protection of the law.
And just finally, you want these schools to open this week, do you?
Well, look, the advice of the CST and the Metropolitan Police is that schools can open, that they are there to support Jewish communities. And I want to see all young people right across the country back in school.
The Shadow Foreign Secretary Labour MP David Lammy. Now, there's more to come. In just a moment, I'll be speaking to a spokesman for the Israeli Defence Forces. We're back soon.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Christopher Hope. Now, as we speak, the Israeli armed forces are massing at the border with Gaza, with analysts suggesting that we're likely to see a full-scale ground invasion. Joining me now to discuss that is Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, a spokesperson for the Israeli Defence Forces. Peter Lerner, good to see you. Thank you for joining us today on the Camilla Tominey Show. What are Israel's war aims?
Christopher, thank you. In the aftermath of last week's massacre of Israeli families and the abduction of over 120 people, the government has instructed the IDF to destroy Hamas's capability, to destroy and target its leaders, and make sure that they can never, ever again target and butcher our babies in their beds.
So Israel will withdraw when that war aim is completed, if it's completed?
We're determined to destroy Hamas's capability, and we will absolutely deliver the goods.
But are you fearful, though, that Israel could be engaged in a propaganda war and a prolonged battle here with Gaza, with Hamas in Gaza?
We're already seeing Hamas's propaganda efforts. I think, in this region, fake news was probably invented. We are trying to combat that, and Hamas is obviously going to try and, I would say, manipulate people's perceptions of what's going on. Yesterday, there was an extensive report of a truck and a convoy that was struck supposedly by the Israeli Air Force. I can confirm that this time no Israeli airstrike took place. And from our investigation, it appears that Hamas created the incident completely from A to Z. So they are in an effort. And I'd also say we've seen time and time again that Hamas has no problem, no whims in sacrificing its own people. When they put rockets in the basements of their homes in Gaza, or drones on the roof, drones with explosives on the rooftops of houses, it just goes to show that they are willing to sacrifice anybody living in those houses. So I would say this is the current situation. We are combating that, and most definitely unprepared that Hamas will ever be able to breach our border and come into our communities. And I would say even more than that, we're not prepared that they will govern the Gaza Strip as a staging ground for terrorism against our people.
But Peter Lerner, there's a message out today from the Israeli Defence Forces saying that you will allow people in Gaza to move south 10 a.m. to 1 p.m, use that window to move south. What happens after 1 p.m?
So we have, this is day 3 of the evacuation of people from the north of Gaza Strip to the south, precisely because the people of Gaza are not our enemy, but Hamas is our enemy. So we're differentiating. This is between terrorists and non-combatants. That is precisely what we're doing. What we've seen when we make these announcements, we've seen active operations on behalf of Hamas, both physically blocking people from evacuating. So they want more images of death and destruction as far as they're concerned, and also sending messages out, telling people to ignore the IDF's instruction. We're actually happy to see that people obviously know that Hamas are not doing them any favors, and therefore actually heading down south. So it's an ongoing, this is day 3, and we can expect that to continue. Now, our ground operation, if and when it does happen, will be in accordance to the laws of armed conflict. We will do the best of our operational capability to differentiate between non-combatants and the terrorist organization Hamas and all of its proxies within the Gaza Strip, because there's the Palestinian Islamic Jihad as well that also have forces, and all of these organizations are closely tied with Iran. So we need to be prepared for the long haul here. It's not going to be a short operation. And I would say from our perspective, the government's directive, we are not limited by time.
But where will they go? The southern border is full. It's 2.1 million people living in Gaza. Where can they go? They're all going to squeeze into the southern part of Gaza. I mean, that's hardly in line with humanitarian ideas and how others should be treated.
No, on the contrary, the worst case scenario is actually that they would stay in where we plan to conduct our operations. So they should evacuate to the south, where there is places where people can get holed up and take cover for the time being. And indeed, when we finish and complete our operations, we will announce that they'll be able to come back to their homes. The situation on the ground is one where we are changing the paradigm. When Hamas decided to butcher our babies, they broke the rules of the game. It was a very stable situation of I would say, a non-written understanding that Hamas manages the Gaza Strip. It doesn't conduct a terrorist against Israel. And for the last 2 years, they've been very wary about it. And when they decided to break the rules of the game in such a brutal way, we decided to change the game. So Hamas will be removed from Gaza. We are determined that they will never, ever be able to attack us and our people in their home ever again.
How many civilians in Gaza might die in the coming weeks?
I hope there's no need for civilian death, but unfortunately, 1,300 Israelis butchered at the hands of Hamas leave us no choice but to maneuver and operate. Indeed, the civilian arena for any professional military, and the IDF is a professional arena, is a professional military in this urban arena, is extremely challenging. And that is why we're doing our best in order to differentiate and separate and indeed instruct people. The types of things that we're doing is dropping leaflets from the sky, sending out text messages, phoning people up in order that they evacuate places where we intend to strike when we understand that they are non-combatant people in the area. But yes, Hamas needs to pay. They need to be removed. And I would say in so much so is that they need to be banished from the realm of existence.
Well, Peter Lerner, when will this happen? Is it imminently, like today, tomorrow?
We are, on standby. We've accumulated a huge amount of reservists. Over the last few days, we've recruited some 300,000 reservist forces, accompanied to the regular forces that the IDF has on call at all times. A lot of those of that 300,000 are, of course, focused on preparations for a potential ground operation. If the government instructs us to mobilize, we will be prepared. Our preparations are ongoing, and it's important that we know how to do this. I'd also add, though, that some of those reservists that I pointed out, that 300,000, are also currently on the border and the frontier with Lebanon, because Hezbollah is also testing us as we speak. And I would highly recommend that they actually watch how we are diminishing Hamas's capability to govern in Gaza and hunting down their leaders and terrorists and striking their staging grounds. And I would highly recommend that Hezbollah should not cross that line.
How likely is it that there might be an incursion in the north from Hezbollah?
So I'm aware of several cross-border attacks. Even this morning, we've had anti-tank guided missiles fired at our forces. There are even reports of civilians, workers that in construction that were injured in this attack. So there's a probability. We hope it won't happen, but as we say in the military, hope is not a method. We need to be prepared for any eventuality.
Just finally, Peter Lerner, do you worry, though, that you might end up radicalising a whole new generation of people in Gaza to join Hamas and fight against Israel by doing this?
I worry for the children of Israel. I worry for the families that live under that threat of being abducted. I worry for the young men and women that went to have a party in the desert and never found their way home. Those are the people I am charged to worry for. I would expect the leaders of the Palestinians, Hamas, that they take care of their people, that they use their power in any Palestinian government should use their power to govern, to create an environment that can flourish and can grow and not build tunnels for terror, rockets for hate, and special forces such as the Nukhba force and drones for destruction and death. And we won't permit that to be the reality for our civilians. And each side has their own responsibility towards their civilians. I would say, we say with a very, very heavy heart. On the Saturday of 7th of October, the IDF let down the people of southern Israel. This can never, ever happen again.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, thank you for joining us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy
energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, joining me in the studio now is Israel's ambassador to the UK, Tzipi Hotovely. Tzipi, thank you for joining us today. You're a former minister, you're an MP, now ambassador, you're also a mother. Israel's about to go to war. Many Israeli mothers won't see their children again. How do you feel this morning?
Well, I'm actually very feeling my mother feelings. I think every parent, every Israeli parent will never look at its children again after we've seen those parents protecting their children in those shelters when they're hearing those guns of Hamas terrorists. And unfortunately, some of those families were destroyed. Unfortunately, some of those children saw their parents being executed in front of their eyes, and some of those children are still in Gaza. So I can't be not being emotional. This is definitely something that will change Israel forever. Some people compare it to 9/11. I would say, in proportion, when you take the numbers, it's bigger because Israel is such a small population, and 1,300 Israelis that found their death in a massacre. October 7th massacre will be always remembered. But my message to you, as British audience watching that, those people marching in London, supporting those horrors of Hamas, are supporting pure evil. You cannot support pure evil. This is such a simple moral decision to make. Do you support mothers and fathers protecting their children, their innocent babies, or do you support people that kill innocent babies, beheaded them, and rape innocent young women?
They were marching for...
This is what we're standing here. This is the two routes to go. And if you're a civilized man, and if you support life and you support human rights, you should support Israel at this time.
And by and large, the crowds yesterday, there were big numbers that were marching for Palestinians, not in support of Hamas. There's a difference there, isn't there?
So I would say, first of all, the timing, the fact that you're coming after this massacre, you should wave Israeli flags in the streets of London. This is the first thing. But the second thing, if you support the Palestinians, go and protest against Hamas, because as James Cleverly, your foreign secretary, said today, any civilian that got killed, either Israeli or Palestinian, it's Hamas' fault. Hamas is the one who's preventing at the moment from all the people that we are trying to keep them safe. They're preventing them to go to a safe shelter when Israel is providing a safe route to the Palestinian people to go down south. So I can tell you this is something that it cannot be justified. The fact they're preventing their own people to be safe, the fact they want their people to be killed in order to show to the world Israel is killing civilians while we are targeting only military targets.
Do you want to see a march in the UK for Israel?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen last week when all your streets were coloured blue and white. Whitehall still has all Israeli flags on your buildings, and this is the time where we've seen 2,000 people marching for Israel and standing for Israel. But I want to see the streets.
Not everywhere. The arch above Wembley Stadium was not lit up in the Israeli colours. How does that make you feel?
I think, again, the moral decision is so simple. I mean, I think Britain had this great moment fighting the Nazi regime. The atrocities we've seen on Saturday are very much similar to ISIS tactics, but also reminded many Jews the atrocities Jews experienced during the Holocaust. So those kind of things have a very, very simple answer. If you want to support good or you want to support pure evil, do you want to support those horrible, barbaric murderers? You shouldn't. I think everyone should feel identifying with Israel, and also the West is under barbaric attack. We've been in the past. We saw the fight of the West with ISIS. And when people are asking me how much it takes to win this war, I will say when the Americans fought in Mosul, in Iraq, there were over 100,000 civilians that got caught in a crossfire and got killed. And I'm not justifying that, but I'm saying this is part of the free world fighting against those barbaric terrorism. And we need to make sure that, first of all, we're trying to make innocent Palestinians safe. And the second thing is Israel is fighting now the most cruel and barbaric terror organization. And this is the time for people to call Hamas. Don't prevent from your people to go and find a shelter, because the Israelis allow, and you are the one who getting them killed.
What's your advice to Jews in Britain today? Should they be hiding symbols of their faith, the Star of David, for example?
Well, this is the job of the Met Police to instruct Jews in London, but I call to all my Jewish brothers and sisters that stand now in strong solidarity to Israel. We will win this war. We will win this war, and I know the UK government is protecting you. I know that all the organisations, the CST in this community is strong, and I know that we will together celebrate winning this war over this pure cruelty.
You've got schools that can't open.
I must say I'm planning to...
Will they open this week?
I'm planning to see all Jewish schools open, and I know that there is enough protection for the Jewish schools, so I'm sure all Jewish kids will get back to their normal...
Have you personally experienced anti-Semitism in this country?
Let me tell you something. This is not the time to discuss the broad anti-Semitism. This is the time to remember what Israel has been through in the last week. We are still burying our deads. We are still mourning for the fact 1,300 people, most of them young families, most of them babies and children. Those footages of young children hugging each other burned to death by Hamas. Those horrible videos of the massacre and the torture that those people went through. Those are the things we're showing to the world, the real face of Hamas. What is the enemy we are facing? It's monsters. Those are monsters, and monsters should be treated in a way that Hamas will never have the control on the Gaza Strip again after Israel finishes the war.
You're a diplomat too. I mean, do you worry, though, that, I mean, it is shocking what happened last weekend in Israel, of course, but if troops go into Gaza in coming days and similar loss of life happens in Gaza, you may lose sympathy. That's a risk for you.
We think that at the moment, the sympathy is with Israel.
Yeah.
The UK government supports Israel, and I want to say how much I appreciate this support, because Prime Minister Sunak said today and last week, he said, we will support you always. We give you a long-run support in order for you to make sure the job is finished. And we cannot do just half the job. You need to listen to this. The main thing now that stands in the head of the Prime Minister and all the people on the ground, including my brothers, are in the front line. The main thing at the moment is the fact that our communities must be protected, that our children will never be in a threat, that terrorists will walk into their bedroom and will kill them when they're asleep and when they're hiding. We cannot afford this type of horror in our streets. And we need to make sure that this threat will permanently be removed. And this is what IDF is doing.
Can violence do that? There must be a political solution to this somehow, mustn't there?
Well, there is political solution when the other side is motivated by some type of vision. Hamas vision, and you need to read Hamas charter in order to understand that, is no Jew will live in the land of Israel, that the whole place will be like Islamic State. This is the vision of Hamas. So they want to do ethnic cleansing, and you could see their intentions. If they could, they would have butchered every single Jew in every single city. So this is their intentions, and this is the ideology we're facing. This is ISIS type of ideology. They're not interested in any political solution, and this is why we need to fight.
We started out, you said you're a mother. What's your message to mothers in Gaza facing what could be a very, very difficult few days?
I'm calling to the mothers of Gaza, protest against Hamas. Go take your children, because Israel is calling you to be safe and stand against this horrific terror organization that is celebrating the fact he's killing babies. If you're mothers that care, you cannot celebrate killing innocent babies.
In terms of the UK, well, there's a big debate here about what the BBC, the national broadcaster, should call Hamas. They're not called terrorists, according to the Ofcom rules. Do you agree with that?
This is disgrace, the fact that they don't call it terrorist. What can be more clear terrorism than what Hamas did on Saturday? This is a recognized terror organization here in the UK, in the US, and this should be the word to use. And I call everyone that is watching the BBC to demand that from the BBC, to call it by its name, because it's terrorism.
The BBC would say that was taking sides. They can't do that because they haven't done it in the past with the IRA in this country, for example.
Just remembering the role that the BBC took in World War II, visiting the Churchill war rooms, do you think the BBC would have thought that Nazi Germany shouldn't call by their names as the enemy and shouldn't be named by the atrocities they did because they don't want to take side? Are they standing in the side of the Western people that are fighting for freedom? This is terror organization. All Western community, all international community should make sure Hamas won't exist after this war.
Well, Tzipi Hotovely, the Ambassador of the UK, thank you for joining us today on the show. Thank you.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry, here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. If you enjoyed the fine conditions we've had around this weekend, we will be holding on to that into the start of the new week as well. A lot of nice conditions to end this evening with as well. A few scattered showers for some coastal districts in the north, but most of us will be staying dry. Some isolated mist and fog patches are possible overnight, and temperatures will be tumbling down a bit. Mid to low single figures in our towns and cities. Rural spots can expect a touch of frost, particularly for central southern Scotland down into northern England. So quite a chilly start to Monday morning. There will also be a touch more cloud around on Monday compared to the weekend, so I can't promise the wall-to-wall sunshine that some of us had throughout Saturday and Sunday. But some brightness still poking through, hazy sunshine in there. Showers feeding into the far southeast of England, a few dotted across northern Scotland as well. Temperatures perhaps up by a degree or so compared to Sunday, generally around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius. The winds, though, will be strengthening in the southwest, and that is due to this area of low pressure that is gradually going to push its way northwards as we head towards Tuesday. So increasingly starting to see gales develop for parts of Wales and southwest England as we head into Tuesday. Most of us should stay dry during daylight hours, though, just this shield of cloud gradually pushing its way northward. So again, sunshine turning hazier in places. This rain, though, will eventually move its way in as we head into the middle part of the week, potentially heavy at times, and some disruption is possible, so do keep up to date with the forecast. Bye-bye for now.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married